Hello everybody. Here's my second video. I don't know, I didn't know if I messed up on it or not, but when I went to change views from just myself to the desktop and me, it froze all the way through half of the video previously. If you've already seen it, you'll know what I mean. But anyway, I'm Charles Walk, for all those that don't know, and for those that haven't seen me in a while. I have been out the loop. My son just recently died, gunned down in Colorado Springs at Memorial Park. They haven't found the culprits yet, but I leave it all in the Lord's hands. I leave it all in His hands. I don't worry about it. I try not to. It's been a little hard for me and the family, but we've been coping. We're doing good together as a group. We're gonna all get together here real soon and go and do a tribute to him out at one of these lakes, and let some balloons fly or something. But anyway, today I wanted to talk to you guys about my lessons learned building BlazingSql on Blazor Framework. For those that don't know what the Blazor Framework is, it's a new framework from Microsoft. They created it. They started working on it probably in 2019, I would have to say, in 2018. But it came to an experimental process in 2019 when I came on board. I took a look at it. I kind of liked the idea. I had just recently been put out of work, from a medical situation. I'm on dialysis, for those that don't know. I'm a dialysis patient on a every other day basis. It's like having a job almost, but wears me out sometime. But I try to keep my head up and just keep on focusing towards my goals and not give up and get into that negative zone. But as I dealt with Blazor, I learned a lot of very, very important things that I'd like to share with you guys. I hope that this really helps you. I'm primarily doing this because I get a lot of feedback from some of my followers and some of the guys that are on Coding Soldiers. BlazingSql is basically just another permutation of ASP.NET. Really, it runs on top of the ASP.NET framework. It's a different pipeline, and it actually allows you to create small applications, which are single-page applications. If you're familiar with React, if you're familiar with Angular, Vue, and however many other frameworks are out there, this one is just based off of C#. There is no, well, you can use JavaScript, but this one is based off of using C# so that you don't have to use JavaScript. I'll give you guys some insight on how you can use just C# without having to worry about JavaScript. But for the most part, you don't have to write your application with JavaScript. For about 80 to 90% of my application is all C#. There's a little bit of JavaScript sprinkled in there for the UI, and a little bit of a whole lot of CSS. As long as you're familiar with CSS, if you built Razor pages, this is pretty much the same thing. It's just you have to think differently on how this is implemented. But it's basically Razor pages. If you like the Razor page syntax, you'll feel right at home. There are no helpers. You are the helper. I'm sure Microsoft is working on some things to make it easier for you to be able to create applications. But for the most part, in my opinion, this is the framework that allows you to have complete control of your interface all the way down to each pixel, pretty much. And I like that aspect of it, being able to have control to that granularity. So I'll try to show you guys some areas of this application that really would appeal to you. I have multiple project solutions in here. Just to let you know, if you're using Blazor, you can implement Blazor with blockchain. If you're implementing HoloChain, which I'm also implementing, you can also implement that with Blazor. The great thing about it is that HoloChain uses Rust in the back end, and that's the other area that I'm working on now. I got to create some Rust functions and stuff like that. Blockchain, I have a C# implementation of this. I just have to get very familiar with it. It's another implementation from a community member who actually started implementing it back last year, I think it was. So I'm joining the crew and helping them out, and also implementing it myself. And as I implement it, I will fix things that need to be fixed and implement things that need to be implemented. But for the most part, my main functionality, my main focus right now was Blazor and Art and Raw. I've rewritten Art and Raw about 80% right now in Blazor. There's some key interface areas that I have to really focus on. It's going to take me some time, because I'm doing certain things for the artists to build them, blogs and journal pages, and allowing them to do their photo galleries. So all of this will be in Blazor, and it's going to be out for full display, so that it'll give everybody an opportunity to be able to come on over and take a look and see how I implemented Blazor. And in these two different projects, I primarily did Art in the Raw as my demonstration to creating a platform for artists. That's pretty much what I did. Majority of my career was create platforms. Way before there was a cloud or anything known as SaaS. We were creating SaaS applications in the enterprise, and in the enterprise, everybody was getting software as a service through the internet, and reports, and being able to do all kind of things through the actual web. And then it just blew into this big cloud and SaaS thing, and this is not much different. I just tried to focus on building things that I think the community can really use. I know some SQL DBAs that can really use this tool in order to script their databases. I have DBAs that have hundreds of databases that they have to manage, and anything that would help them cut the time in order to actually perform their jobs is a game changer. So my area of focus has been in there, in that area, really, because I want to deliver something to some of my DBAs that I know can really use a breather. But I have my projects set up a different way, and everybody can set your projects up a different way. The way you set your project up in Blazor is up to you. There really is no hard and fast way to set up Blazor project the way that you desire to have it set up. For me, I set mine up in solutions. I have a solution set up for my blockchain information. I have a solution set up for my data layer. I have something set up for my HoloChain, my offline, my SMO integration, and then my UI. I have everything segmented. I kind of like having everything componentized. I really do. It makes things a lot easier. And then when I need to fix things, if I got data issues, I just go to my data layer, and then I get into my DAO, and then I just deal with, whatever I need to deal with. Same thing on Blazor. All my Blazor pages, I have all my pages. I can, I kind of went with a different design. That's why I try to tell everybody, your architectural decisions are going to really set the precedent for your application. And what I mean by that is, if you decide to architect it one way and then get halfway through and decided, oh, I don't like this architecture, you got to take everything apart and go the other way. So it really takes some time to think about how you want to architect this and how you want to implement it, so that it'll be best utilized for you throughout the application life cycle. Because as you get in, I've had to actually refactor mine. That's the only reason I bring that up, is because when I started off, I didn't really know how I was going to do anything with this. I tried to do it an MVC way, and I saw the MVC really wasn't the thing. So I left that alone, because I was, there really was no guidance in the beginning as to which direction to go. And so I had to kind of figure it out. And so as you figure it out, you realize you can do almost anything in here. And what I found to work for me was using the Mvvm pattern. I use the Mvvm because it allows me to, it allows everything to be updated without me having to go and manually do it. And when I say that with Blazor, there's a specific process that you have to run through whenever you update state that is outside of the components. You have to manually update the state of that component with the change of the model that you're using that's outside of that actual component, because otherwise, how does that component know anything about the changes? So that's very important. So for me, in order to simplify my work, I decided to implement the iNotify property change, and it works beautifully. And so I implemented throughout all my models for all my interfaces, and everything updates itself and pretty much runs beautifully. So let me show you a quick look and feel of what the application looks like, since I've been sitting here telling you about what it looks like, what it does. I got these Sour Patches I used to get from my grandson, and I saw it and I was like, oh yeah. So I grabbed a bag and decided to eat some. They're pretty good. So here we got just the basic application. A lot of this will be changing here soon, so don't pay any attention to it. What we have here is we have our navigation side of the menu over here. Up top, we have two other navigation options that allow you to go to your account information, because everybody has to have an account if you want to store your scripts to your database profile. So with an account, I'm able to do that. And in your account, you can go in and set up your email, your password, your two-factor identification. You can download your personal information if you want to. And this is where we're going to be configuring your database. And I'm not sure if I'm going to really implement this on the first or not. This is all going to be available on the website on July 1st. I'm sorry, July 1st for public beta. I want to thank everybody that participated in the alpha. It really helped me a lot. It gave me some insight in some areas that I needed to change. And so I made those changes, and with great improvement, thank goodness. But I'm not sure if I'm going with this yet. This may or may not be implemented because I'm using a ghost account that really doesn't really require everybody to have their own database. So I may not use this. But anyway, as long as you're logged in, your state will be persisted, and anything that you want to save your queries as, like let's say for instance we decide to do a query, you're able to save that query to your profile and name it whatever you want. My query. But the main functionalities that I wanted to get together were the query, and right now we're at a state where it's just the query and scripting your database. Other features are coming down the road now that I've gotten more and more familiar with what I can do with Blazor using SMO. So now there's a whole lot of features that I have coming down the pipeline. Working with my daughter to do a roadmap so that I can let everybody know what to look forward to towards the future. Now that we got scripting and querying in, my next functionality I want to do is start giving everybody abilities to create users, because right now all that functionality doesn't exist. It just shows you what users you have, but I want to give everybody the ability to create users, delete users, change properties on users, change passwords, so on and so forth. but that's coming down the road. There's just a lot of things that I can do now that I understand Blazor more and how to implement this the way I want to. But the key functionality that I was really trying to get to function was basically scripting and querying. Because if those two didn't work, this was it was a worthless process. So once I got those working, now I know everything else can be done easy. But you can script your tables. And you'll get whole script of all the tables that are in your database. That happened in 4 seconds. So because I'm using SQL Server Management objects, I'm basically getting near same performance as SQL Server Management Studio, which is what I loved. Let's query Surilog. And Surilog is actually the my logging table that has thousands of records. But I'm only pulling the first 1,000 and then getting it back in less than a second. You can execute it as many times as you want. I have a thread issue I got to figure it out. But everything is multi-threaded. I have all this running on multiple threads. If you're not familiar with Blazor, you can run asynchronous processes. So this is its own process, this is its own process, and this is its own process. So I could technically be generating a script and then running a query at the same time. Ain't that good. I'm getting errors doing a demo. I got a failed operation. This user doesn't have create database permissions. Yep, there we go. There's my error. Sorry y'all had to see that in Visual Studio, but yeah, I have everything piping up to an error dialog. So basically, I'm trying to run this script. So I generated the script and then I tried to run the script and I don't have create permissions, so it failed on me. So don't do that. Anyway. Yeah, so everything is bound by SMO, so all the permissions, that's what I love about this. If I just go through the API, everything is bound by the API's rules and regulations. I am just using the API the way that it was programmed, and if you have access to a database, you can get access to it. If you don't, you'll get this message. The server principal is not able to access the database, and that's because of the security rules that are in place. So that's the beauty of having SMO already doing all the security stuff for me, so I don't have to do any of it. The other thing that I love about Blazor, the gotchas, is that if you run everything asynchronously, when you're loading, matter of fact, it's best if I show you. One of the gotchas is that I used to load let's get to a component. Let me give you a simple component. Let's go to, this is the counter component. This is what comes with the default template when you start a Blazor project. This is pre-programmed. This is the other thing that I like about components. The component architecture allows me to build a component with all of the code within the component. That allows me to utilize this component anywhere and everywhere that I choose to, without it actually hindering or harming any other area of my application. And the beauty of it is, if I have to or need to, I can use this counter component in another project and the code would still work the same. I would just bring it in as a regular component, which I'm not sure if anybody has seen this. So let me show you real quick. Let's put it on the main maybe. Trying to look for an area to put it where I ain't gotta worry about it. Oh, I'll just put it on my put it on my component page. I'll put it on my splash page. All right, on my splash page, I'm just going to add in counter. And we're going to do new count equal. No, we'll leave new count out for now. I added new count in there in the previous video to show you guys how it can do that, but I'll leave that out for now. Now that I've added counter, and this may just be a counter component that's from somebody else's library. I don't know anything about the internal bits of it. All I know is that it's a component that I can use in my project. I add it to the page, and then you'll see how it displays and functions the way that it was pre-programmed by whoever the third party provided, which happens to be Microsoft. And please forgive the performance. I'm streaming, so it's slow as a dog. I'm working off a processor. Yeah, and leave all that alone. I'm working off a laptop, so it's not that powerful. But there's my counter. And then it'll function just as it was functioning from whatever the third party programmed it to do. And I haven't done anything. I just brought the counter in and put it in. And if this is what the functionality is that I needed, then boom, I would be off and going. And if it was something that was a little bit more diverse, like a calendar or maybe a scheduler or maybe a tab panel, I mean, anything that you want to componentize, you can componentize it and put all of its functionality inside, and then other people can use it. This is really good for developers. You can work on certain pieces of an application individually and then submit those as components to be added into the main application. And these can be, this can be all done in a separate Razor project if you'd like, which I didn't do it with this one because there were certain things that I need that are within the Blazor project itself. Making it external just didn't make sense. So I might entertain it later on just to make sure that they're all separate in the event that I want to use some of the components somewhere else, which all of these are specific to BlazingSql, so it don't make any sense. But anyway, each one of the components, the beautiful thing that I like about it is this counter was added. This counter's state is basically just this. This is the only state that, or shall I say, this is the only state that it even concerns about. This is a parameter that I put in on a previous video, because you're allowed to use parameters in your components to pass in outside external values or value types or what have you into that actual component for it to utilize. And so this one I was passing in an integer, which I was displaying here, and then I was activating this integer on the outside with a button click that was just incrementing this count by 1, and so you would see the number change on this interface. So you can either have parameters that are fed in or parameters that are actually locally, and then you can change them within. And these parameters are just like your state, basically, your local state. So this is the local state. This just happens to be external state being passed in the local state. Like, on React, you have your props, So these are like the props that are being passed in. They just call them parameters. So you pass in your props, and then the props that you pass in are what's going to be used in that component. Then outside state, the one thing you got to remember with outside state, if you're passing in outside state, then you don't have to worry about this thing that they call state has changed, which is something you have to call whenever your state changes on the outside of that component. And since this component's state is changing within, you don't necessarily need to do that. So, but let's say, for instance, this state was changing. I wouldn't necessarily have to say state changed because it's being passed in as a parameter. Microsoft did a beautiful thing. The parameter automatically calls state has changed for you. So you don't even have to worry about it. So as this value is changing, this counter will get the notified changes. That's the beauty that I love about this. Another thing too is when you build your components, you can either build your component like as this counter is. It's just a single component all by itself. And I know there's a lot of people that are advocates like myself, which I kind of prefer a code behind or a class file to put all this code instead of have it in the same code base as this is in. What I would do is I would go in and I would take this counter, I would copy it, I would do a add class, paste it, and put a CS on the end. And this is this information is on Microsoft's website, so you can actually go to Microsoft's website and it'll tell you exactly what you need to do. But I would do a base counter base, and then I would do a base component model, which I have my own component model set up, which is basically an abstract class that I set up for all my components that inherit certain things that are already built in. The main layout is provided to everybody. There's a scripter console component that's provided to everybody. I have a base tab console model, which is for every model that's provided to the tab interface. It comes in an app state model, which is the base class for all of my models. So this works beautifully. And so then I also have my loading and my loading class, and then of course I have my notify property change, which is my implementation of iNotify property changed, and that's in my oh, I did take it out. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, it's in my it's in my iModel property change. I took that out because there's something I'm trying to fix. But that allows me to be able to have my state automatically update the interfaces for me. But we got this counter now. So this is how you can pull your code out of your counter component. You just do a copy, cut, go here to your counter and do a paste. Bring in all of the actual classes, and there you go. Anyway, okay, so now I have separated that, and you have to put a base. It can't have the same name. There are some examples on the internet which recommended doing partial. That causes problems, I found out. So I don't recommend that. It may work if you could figure out why it's blowing up, but mine was blowing up. I couldn't figure it out, so I went to the example Microsoft gives, where you basically add base to your actual component's name, and then you have that counter inherit from that. So I would go up here and say inherit counter base. And so then I can eliminate all of this down here. So that's an easy way to extract your rear code. And in my opinion, and I highly recommend that you go this route. I know it's an extra class that you have to worry about, an extra file, shall I say. But the benefit of it is that then when you're within here, you have full IntelliSense access, which means that you can get access to things that, you can get all this IntelliSense access that you can't really get over here. Because if I started, typing things in, I can only see what this class offers. Oh, it has to be protected or public. Increment, protected. Huh? Oh. Sorry, I was like, why is that red? Anyway, so there's my component, and I like this little feature here, remove all these unnecessary usings. So now my counter has a backing code behind file, basically, and this is just the actual HTML for that counter component. So this is all that you would see in the interface, but this would be all the code behind it that actually tells it what to do. And I love this model. As you see, I have it for pretty much all of my components. Every component has a backing code behind. It allows me to keep everything separate and clean. I bring in my errors model, which I have an errors model that actually is handling all my errors, which is basically just an implementation that keeps a collection of all my exceptions, which is using an observable collection, so that when this exceptions collection changes, everything is notified of the change. But that's how I do all my errors, and I highly recommend you probably go that route in order to handle your errors. You want to kind of centralize your errors so that you can control, at least in my opinion, control where it's coming from. So all my errors all the way throughout are piped into the errors model, and then the errors model is utilized in an errors console component that I have that actually displays all the errors when a user wants to see what the errors look like. Every initial error at the time of impact, I have it automatically displaying a dialog box, and then I have it putting it in using Logger to log it to my database, and then I'm also putting it in the errors model so that it can be presented in an errors dialog that I have built to display all this. But there's so many ways you can do this. For the most part, I try to put everything centralized into my main layout. My main layout is the one page that I know that's going to always be up. If you shut down your application, this page no longer exists. So I figured this will be the foundation of where I put all my base code for everybody to inherit. I'm using cascading parameters. If you're familiar with cascading parameters, and if you're not, you'll enjoy them once you understand them and see the utilization of them. I haven't seen any negativity or any performance issues whatsoever in using a cascading value, which was my first concern in the beginning, because that means that every component in the hierarchy would be receiving a copy of the cascading value, or could receive a copy of the cascading value of main layout, and I didn't know if I wanted that to happen. But once I implemented it, I realized the performance was beautiful, and it worked exactly how I needed it to work. So I highly recommend using cascading values if you need to, because cascading values will provide the base value of whatever you want, which I'm just providing the main layout itself. That's what the this is for. and I'm providing it, which basically gives access to all of my properties that exist in main layout. And that's for the benefit of certain areas of my application that need access to the server core and need access to the state individually. And then, of course, data service. So everything is pretty much being provided through the main layout. And so then all my components can just access that to get what they need in retrospect to what's being shared from the main layout. All of my error messages are being sent through here. So all of the actual components can send their error messages through here. This is what I mean by piping. So every error message comes through here, and then I populate a display dialog, which gets displayed to show the error, and then I also log it to the database. And then I have my execute. I have an execute process that handles all of my executing queries, so that when you push the execute button, it basically goes and finds the query that's currently active, and it runs the query. If it's not currently active and it's not a query module, it will not run. Actually, the button will be disabled, which is another thing that I put in there, which is why I love this. On the actual tabs, I have the tabs set up so that if a certain tab is not of a query console type, then it will not enable that button. So then you'll never be able to actually select this. But if it is enabled, it'll basically go and find the active console, and then it'll run that query for you immediately. So there's different ways in order to implement it through here. Some of the gotchas, state management. I basically use dependency injection. For those that are not familiar, dependency injection allows you to actually save state throughout the scope of the application, which is more based off of a singular, or you can do it transient, which is based off of each request, or you can actually do a now my brain just went dead. You can do a scoped. The transient is just every time you call, it's going to give you a new instance. The scope is going to give you the same copy of that same implementation throughout the your current session. And if your session goes away, it's going to give you a fresh new copy. So that's the area of dependency injection that I use for my state management. Now, this isn't bulletproof, and I don't recommend people use this for bulletproof. I only use it to handle the state throughout the application. I have a mechanism, a timer that I built into my layout down on the bottom. And it runs a save routine, which basically takes my it checks my my state for autosave, which I have an ability to turn autosave on or turn autosave off. It'll do a thread sleep for about 5 seconds, and then it basically will back up the actual app state to the database, and that only takes like less than a second to do. So the state is serialized and is stored in the database. That's how I recommend you back up your state if you need another means of state backup, or use Redux. There's a Redux implementation that I've seen. I haven't really entertained it since this is working just fine for me. Some of the other gotchas, I have a virtual grid. You can create your own grid. Mine's just using a regular table. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar. I am Fusion, I think it is. Yeah, Sync Fusion. I'm using these components. I just recently started experimenting with them. For those that don't know, you can actually get this totally free if you are a small company under Let's just read it. I don't want to give you no numbers that are wrong. Yeah, you get the 30-day trial, but if you're a company under... Dang, they don't have it posted nowhere. That's interesting. But anyway, you can get this library to use if your company has less than 1,000 employees, makes less than $1 million, I think it is. I hate to tell you guys wrong information. I'm trying to remember where I saw it at now. But I highly recommend this library. Well, I can't really say highly recommend it. I recommend it, what I've seen of it so far, and the simplicity of the component implementation. They show you some source code that you can look at. In fact, I'll just go to an example. Let's go to Blazor, view demos. And there's a lot of third parties. There's Telerik has created some a library. There's a whole bunch of other third parties that have created libraries. This one really, it really settled home with me because there is so many components that it offers that I would have to spend a day in a life to build. Scheduler, I have plans for that. The calendar, I have plans for that. You know, all of these charts, I have plans for that. Some of these buttons, I can just change them out for the regular HTML buttons and text boxes that I'm using. The data grid, I have plans for that. Their data grid is phenomenal. It allows you to be able to actually go in, Blazorize. This is the other library that I use. This is open source. This is called Blazorize. They have a grid on here also, which is I was going to use initially. The only reason I didn't use it is because they had a flaw in their pager. The pager wouldn't. It wasn't responsive. So now they have it responsive. So I'm considering revisiting it, but with this over here, I don't know if it's worth it because this offers you all kind of functionality, just like a true grid would offer you, and gives you sorting. You know, it gives you searching capability. All of this is stuff that I could really use in order to represent a grid for doing queries and so on and so forth. So this is my next implementation down the road. These are the type of controls and components that are being offered, and these are very powerful. And this is all using WebAssembly, so you can basically create these, and these are all run in the browser, and pretty much at the performance of a desktop app. To be honest with you, you got a tree grid, so you can actually have drill downs with subtasks or sub areas that are only viewable based off of that. That's cool. I don't know a good use case for that in my scenario, but it could be a good use case for a lot of folks. They got grids, they got data visualization, they got notifications, progress bars. Matter of fact, I might use this one. Or maybe this one. But this is good. And then here's the source code. The source code shows you how easy it is to implement it. So the code behind, these are the styles that, and this is the beauty of having a component. You would just basically create this component right here. This would be its own individual component. You could basically just copy this and paste it into a component in Visual Studio, which you have to install something first, which I've only downloaded, haven't installed it, so that's a waste to even try to show you that. You can basically just copy and paste this into a component, and then you can basically use this anywhere that you need to within your application. Now, all of the I don't know if I like this, but to each their own. He has a different way of identifying his variables, but that's interesting. It's almost like these are representative of the components. Oh, these are references. Ah, gotcha. That's why he did that. Okay. So, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar in Blazor. You can set up references to your actual component. So what they did was they set up this component, and then they set up a reference to it. Now, the reference to this component allows you to be able to actually run, say, for instance, you want to run JavaScript. So now that you have a reference to this component, there are certain methods that are in this that you can actually, like, they have a refresh. What else do they have? So there's some methods that are in there that you can use. Refresh is one of them. And then at the same time, because you have a reference to that component, if you needed to do a JavaScript call on that, you can just pass a reference to that component to JavaScript, and then JavaScript can use that element in order to get access to that component that you're speaking on. And that's one other area that I do like about Blazor too, is you can make references to your components and then use JavaScript against those elements themselves. But this is really a nice library. I really highly recommend it. It has a lot of, I can go through this forever. You know, I can show you the calendar. I love their calendars. There's a lot of different functionalities, so I highly recommend you check that out, because this will make your whole development process a whole lot easier from the interface perspective. Is there anything else that I wanted to let you guys know before I let you go? Services. What I'm using here, just to let you guys know, is I'm using Blazor 3.1. I'm using .NET Core 3.1. I'm using SQL Server 2017. And I'm using SQL Server 2016, I think. Dang, I haven't looked at that server in about a month, because I was planning on upgrade. But anyway, so everything that this application is using is all Microsoft. It's all SQL Server, it's all SMO, and it's all Blazor on the .NET Core library. .NET Core is, if you're afraid of .NET Core, don't be afraid of it. Just know that there's certain things that you cannot do in .NET Core that you can do in the whole .NET library. If you want to use the .NET library, which soon it'll be .NET 5, I think it is, and that's going to be their convergence in the .NET library. So .NET Core is going to be going away, but then we'll have one single solitary library that we can use. And so I would say that .NET Core, the issues is setting up your server. If you don't have your server set up, you need to have your hosting package installed. You need to have your certificate installed, which I just got notified this morning that my certificate expired on my Art in the Raw website. The one on Blazor is still good to go until September. So I got to renew both of those soon. But you got to have an updated security certificate, because this uses SSL. What else? You want to make sure that if you're using application state in between components. You got to remember when you're actually changing something in one component, you need to make sure that the other component that's also using that same state gets notified of the change that you made, and that's where the state has changed implementation has to come in. So those are areas that you'll find difficulties. You'll find that you'll update something and then something doesn't reflect on the UI. It's because the state hasn't been changed in order to reflect that. Because the state has changed basically tells WebAssembly that new data has been presented. Re-render the API where state has modified the UI. So there's a process where WebAssembly will only send down changes based off of the data that has been reflected. So if your component hasn't changed, it won't be re-rendered basically. It'll just keep its same stance because it hasn't changed. But oh man, there are so many. I wrote down some notes. Async. Async everything. If you can async everything, it will make your application run so much more performant. When you click a button, you don't want that interface to have to freeze, which basically means if you click the button, WebAssembly takes over the GUI thread. And so that means nothing else can be done. So if you wanted to go and click another button or click something else on the page, nothing else will function until that process that you just initiated completes. That's why asynchronous processes are very key. So you set up your asynchronous event handlers and everything in order to execute asynchronously so that your UI is not phased by the work that's being done in the background. And then when the data is modified, you have to make sure that you update the state update the UI to let it know that the state has changed. Other than that, I don't really think there are too many other problems. It's just a different way of thinking. You have to think differently when you're developing this. You can't think that from the request response model anymore. This is kind of like there really isn't any request response. You handle everything within the UI itself. So when an event takes place, you handle that right then and there. There is no going back to the server and doing something and then coming back with results. Everything is taken care of right there in the browser. And that to me was the beautiful aspect of this. I can connect to a SQL server through web services and get the data that I need and then update the UI as is needed. And so I'm going to leave it at that. I didn't really want to make this too long. I just really wanted to give some impact and some insight into how Blazor has fared for me as I've been developing BlazingSql. BlazingSql will be available July 1st. If nothing goes wrong, I have to deal with this server issue now, and then I have a couple more bugs that I'm trying to fix with this application, but I'm gonna make a public beta so everybody will be able to test this. I created a ghost account that everybody will be able to use. It only allows you to do read only. There will be no changing until I implement another process to handle everybody having their own database. But right now, everybody will at least be able to go in and play around with it. So any developers or companies that are looking at entertaining Blazor, you can have an example in order to look at it. You can come in, check it out, see what it does, see what the functionality it offers, what you can and can't do. I don't really offer all of that in the example, but you'll be able to see what it actually can do. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email at info@artandtheraw.com. You can catch me on Facebook at Art and the Raw. And that'll be it. Actually, if you need to reach me on Instagram, you can catch me on Instagram at Art Naral, Twitter Art Naral. So there's many ways you can contact me, but the best way to contact me is just send me an email, and I'll answer any questions I have. I can't take on any projects, so please don't ask me to take on any projects. I have way too many projects right now. Unless it's a good paying project, I guess I can put maybe one or two projects to the side. But right now I'm trying to focus on BlazingSql, which I want to have that finalized and out to some of my DBA friends that I've spoken to about it, that are really eager to start using it in order to script out their databases. I have one DBA that manages over 170 something databases, but he works for a hosting company, so they have a lot of databases, and they need something to be able to script the databases so that in the event that they crash or have any issues, they can back them up, just for redundancy. So they have ways of doing it through SQL. Of course, everybody knows that you can go through SQL Server Management Studio and use generate scripts, and you can generate all the scripts on your database. What I was trying to do with this was simplify the process, and at the same time maintain all the settings in between each implementation, because when you have those settings, I know for me, I'll go through and I'll check all the check boxes, and then I'll run the script, and then I'll want to run a different variation of that. I got to go and start all over. So with what I tried to implement is all the settings are going to still exist. You can run as many scripts as you want with the same settings as you need, and change the settings as you need to accordingly. So there's a little difference in that area, which I saw that was my pain point. So I tried to make that pain point non-existent in this, and it worked pretty well. So there's a lot of things that you can do with Blazor. I highly recommend that you at least start experimenting with it, seeing how it can work in your environment. If you need, you need some help getting developers up to speed on how to utilize Blazor, I'm fair game for coming in for some training. So something I've been working with Microsoft, trying to get some training education together for Blazor. Since it's so new, there's not really much left. Not really much existent right now. So when that comes existent, hopefully Microsoft have that available soon, and then I can hopefully provide that to you guys too, and you guys be able to get that and help you understand Blazor internally a lot better. Because on the outside, there's books coming out. People are developing books. I only looked at one the other day from A-Press, and I usually go with A-Press. That's my book, my book of choice. What do they call them people? The publisher. My publisher of choice, A-Press. But there are so many books out there now that are being provided in order to teach you how to use Blazor. Highly recommended. My whole purpose of building BlazingSql was to test the breadth of everything that it can do, and see if it can fulfill a dream that I always had, to create a web-based version of SQL Server Management Studio. And from what I've been able to accomplish so far, which my two features that I wanted to create were the ability to run scripts and the ability to query your databases. And those two features I have functioning, and that let me know that the rest of the ideas that I have are very very close to becoming possible. I just need to get in and make the work happen. It's not very hard to do a lot of this. It just takes time to think it through and make sure that you put in your code correctly. If you don't put the code in correctly, you don't put in your event handlers correctly, you can miss out on a lot of things. Like when I run the script, I have a script event handler to handle any errors that happen during the script, so that I can get notified of it. And that's why I like the aspect of Blazor. Gives you kind of that web capability and the desktop capability at the same time. So I can kind of program like I'm programming desktop apps, but at the same time still program like I'm programming web apps. It's just phenomenal. It's a beautiful thing. So I hope this helped. I hope I didn't miss out on anything telling you guys. I just really wanted to share as much as I can. I have hundreds of components that you can build hundreds of components, and before you know it, your app will be componentized big time. But it's a beautiful thing because once you build these components, they'll just always work. I don't have to ever touch these components again unless I'm adding some extra functionality to them. And every time that I launch my application, it should just work. Or did I just change something to make it break? I think I changed something. No, I didn't. Okay. I don't even need to do this. I'm streaming, so this is gonna be slow like anything anyway. But anyway, I hope this helped everybody. My whole goal is to try to educate as much as possible, and at the same time, my company primarily we focus on research and development. We're a platform building company. That's my first experiment in platform building was with Art and Raw. It was enjoyable. There's a lot more that I have to do with that. I have completely rewritten it in Blazor. It's at about 80% rewritten right now. I have like a couple more things because it's a lot of interface stuff that I'm doing with with Art and Raw that I'm not doing with BlazingSql that takes time. So that'll be coming out sometime in August or September. I think more like September, and look forward to it. It's coming. I got a lot of things planned for that platform for the artists before I turn it over to a third party. Been trying to work with a non-profit so I can turn this over to them so that they can actually use it for offering as a service to the community, and then they'll be able to get grants and stuff on it to pay for it because it is a cost. I have to pay for the server, I have to pay for the database, I have to pay for a lot of things that, not expensive, but it's all coming out of my pocket right now. So I figure if I turn it over to a nonprofit, they can at least get funding to take care of the maintenance of keeping it up, and then offering that to the artist community. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not really quite sure if that's going to go down or whether I need to start a non-profit myself. We'll see. But I hope this helped. I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss out on anything. Nope, that's it. So I hope this helped. If you have any questions, like I said, just send me an email. You guys, take care. Take care.